Dominic Hayes only wanted to keep his 5-year-old daughter from freezing during a blizzard at 11:45 p.m. in Oak Ridge, Oregon. He was willing to shovel snow or fix leaky roofs just to get a safe place on the porch of a widow named Clara. But the townspeople only saw him as a dirty, homeless black man to despise and avoid. When Clara welcomed them into her mid-century wooden home with a $25,000 debt, they caught the attention of Jefferson Cole. The corrupt commissioner threatened to take Dominic's daughter away to force him to support the Harborview project. This fateful meeting pushed them both into a fight to expose the true face of the people in power. Stolen secret files, midnight blackmail, and the power of a giant construction company were waiting for them. Can a father's love save the widow's home and expose the dark secrets of the whole town? Because that knock came at 11:45 p.m., everything in Clara Montgomery's life changed before morning. Wind screamed through the gap under her front door. Snow piled higher against the old wooden porch every minute. Inside, the small kitchen smelled like boiled potatoes and cold pine wood. A radiator ticked somewhere behind the wall, slow and steady. Clara pulled her cream sweater tight around her shoulders. She stared at one bowl of thin potato soup on the table. It was all she had left for dinner that night. Her phone screen glowed with a balance of $42. A mortgage bill for $25,000 sat beside it, unopened for 3 days. She pushed the bill away and rubbed her tired eyes. The house felt colder than usual tonight, even with 2 blankets on her lap. Then she heard it. 3 soft knocks on the door. Clara froze. Nobody visited this house anymore, not since her husband David died 2 winters ago. She crossed the room slowly and looked through the frosted window glass. Her breath fogged the cold pane. A tall black man stood on her porch, snow piling thick on his shoulders. He held a small girl close against his chest, wrapped in a thin jacket. The girl's cheeks glowed bright red from the wind. Her small body trembled with every breath. Clara's hand hovered over the lock. Her heart pounded once hard against her ribs. Old fear whispered that she should just stay quiet and wait for them to leave. She opened the door anyway. "Please," the man said. His voice cracked, rough from the freezing air. "My daughter has a fever. We just need somewhere warm for one night." Clara looked at the little girl's glassy, half-closed eyes. Something in her chest pulled tight, softer than fear. She stepped back and waved them both inside. "Come in before you both freeze out here," she said. The man's name was Dominic Hayes. His daughter was Hazel, only 5 years old. Clara gave them the last of her potato soup without a second thought. She wrapped Hazel in David's old wool blanket, the one she never let anyone else touch. Then she gave Dominic the only real bed left in the house. Clara slept that night on her worn brown armchair by the window. The old springs poked into her back through the thin cushion. She did not complain once. In the morning, Dominic kept a promise he never spoke out loud. He grabbed an old shovel from the leaning shed. He cleared every inch of snow from her walkway. His breath rose in thick white clouds each time he swung the shovel. He found scrap wood in the shed. He fixed the broken window frame the storm had cracked open overnight. "I don't have money," he told her, his breath fogging in the cold morning air. "But I can fix things with my hands. Let me earn my place here." Clara almost smiled at that, small and quiet. It was the first real smile she had allowed herself in months. She left for her job at the county library soon after. She worked long nights sorting old dusty records. She did not know it yet. This one act of kindness would pull her into a fight bigger than her small wooden house. She did not know a storm far worse than snow was forming downtown. It was already coming straight for her front door. At the library, Clara overheard 2 men arguing near the reading room, their voices sharp and low. One was Jefferson Cole, the town's planning commissioner, his shoes clicking hard on the tile. The other was Marcus Vance, project director for something called Harborview Condominiums. "We clear that whole strip by spring," Cole said, tapping a thick folder against his palm. "Every house on the shoreline goes, including the widow's place." Clara's stomach dropped like a stone. She gripped the wooden shelf beside her until her knuckles turned white and bloodless. Her ears rang louder than the men's voices. When she got home, that evening, a bright orange notice was taped across her front door. Emergency eviction order. 30 days to leave the only home she had left. Her hand shook as she read the notice twice, then a third time. The words blurred together on the page. Dominic stepped outside and saw the paper too. His jaw tightened until the muscle jumped near his ear. A thin vein pressed against his temple, pulsing hard. "They can't just take your home," he said quietly, his voice low, with barely held anger. "They can," Clara whispered back. "They already are right now." That night, Clara sat on the kitchen floor and cried until her throat burned raw. She had no money and no power to fight men like Jefferson Cole. The mortgage alone was already enough to bury her fully. Dominic wanted to help her fight, more than he could say, but fear held him back too, cold and heavy in his chest. If Cole dug into his past, he might learn Dominic was not just another homeless man. He was hiding something far bigger, a truth that could cost him his own daughter. "Maybe you should just take whatever they offer," Dominic said, staring hard at the floor. "Keep your dignity. Walk away safe while you still can." Clara's eyes snapped up, sharp and burning, with sudden fury. "This house is the only thing left of David," she said, her voice shaking. "I would rather die than let them stomp on that." Dominic looked away, ashamed of his own quiet fear. He did not tell her the real reason he wanted to avoid a fight. Not yet, not tonight. But something was about to change everything they both believed they knew. The next day, Clara visited Abigail Vance. She was a 72-year-old woman living in a small nursing home. Abigail once ran the town's land records office for over 20 years. She had helped Clara through the darkest days after David's death. Abigail pressed an old rusted key into Clara's open palm, her fingers thin and cool. "There's a box in the library basement," she whispered, glancing toward the hallway. "Files nobody ever digitized. Go look before somebody burns it." Then Abigail's voice dropped even lower, barely above a breath. "Your husband's accident at the harbor was not his fault," she said. "A contractor cut corners on that structure years ago. Jefferson Cole covered the whole thing up." Clara's breath caught hard in her chest. For 5 years, she believed David's death was simple bad luck. Now that belief was cracking apart in her hands. That night, she snuck down to the library basement long after closing. She found the metal box exactly where Abigail promised. Inside were thick stacks of old reports and old blueprints. She carried them home hidden under her coat, heart hammering the whole walk back through the snow. When Dominic saw the blueprints spread across the kitchen table, something shifted fast in his face. He picked up one page, then another, his eyes moving quickly across the lines. "Where did you get these?" he asked, not looking up. "Doesn't matter right now." Clara said, "Can you even read that stuff?" Dominic did not answer right away. He sat down slowly and studied the papers. Sunrise crept through the curtains as he traced lines, with one finger under the dim lamplight. By morning, his hands were trembling, but not from the cold anymore. "This foundation was built on loose sand," he said, voice barely steady. "The same mistake that collapsed the old harbor dock years ago. The same mistake that killed your husband." Clara stared at him, her mouth going dry. "How could you possibly know that?" Dominic finally told her the truth he had buried for years. He was not just a homeless man who wandered into town by accident. He was an engineer, trained at Stanford, who once designed bridges for a living. Clara's mouth opened, but no words came out at first. "I'll help you prove what really happened to David," Dominic said, taking her cold hand in his. "He didn't die because he was careless. I can show the whole world that." For the first time since the blizzard, Clara let herself believe things might finally change. Over the next week, life inside the small wooden house began to settle. A strange, gentle rhythm took hold. Hazel's fever broke on the second morning. Color returned to her small, round cheeks. Clara taught Hazel how to fold paper birds at the kitchen table. Soup simmered on the stove. The smell of onions, and time filled the whole house, warm and thick. Hazel giggled every time her paper wings fell apart. Dominic watched them from the doorway, arms crossed, a small tight feeling rising in his chest. He had not seen his daughter laugh like that in months, not since they lost their apartment back in November. "You're good with her," he told Clara one evening, voice quiet. Clara shrugged, eyes fixed on the folding paper. "David and I always wanted kids. Life had other plans." The words hung in the air, heavy but not sad. Dominic understood grief well enough not to press further. Each night, Hazel fell asleep under David's old blanket. Clara and Dominic sat by the fireplace and talked. Slowly, carefully, they began trading pieces of their past like small, fragile gifts. Word spread fast through Oak Ridge over the next few days. Jefferson Cole sent a team of inspectors to Clara's house at 9 in the morning. They claimed her home was suddenly unsafe to live in. They wanted her out right away, no delays allowed. But something else happened too, something Cole never expected. Neighbors up and down the coast were also being pushed out by the Harborview project. They started gathering outside Clara's fence. The inspectors tried to fake a wiring problem to force Clara's signature on a surrender form. Dominic stepped between them calmly, his voice level and firm. He quoted Oregon building codes from memory, word for word. Then he fixed the wiring himself in under 30 minutes. The inspectors left with red faces and empty clipboards, muttering under their breath. The neighbors who had gathered outside cheered from the fence line. An old fisherman named Roy Baxter clapped Dominic hard on the shoulder. His weathered hands smelled like salt and diesel oil. "Never seen anybody talk to Cole's men like that," Roy said, grinning wide. "You got a friend on this street now, son." Clara watched from the porch, arms wrapped around herself against the wind. Something warm moved through her chest, something she had not felt in a long time. For the first time since David died, she did not feel fully alone against the world. But not everyone on that street smiled at the scene. A woman 2 houses down watched, through her curtains, phone already pressed to her ear. Jefferson Cole watched from his parked car down the street, arms crossed tight. His fingers drummed against the steering wheel in a fast, uneven rhythm. Something about this quiet stranger made his stomach twist with real unease. He decided right then to find out exactly who Dominic Hayes really was. A private detective Cole hired came back 3 days later. He carried a folder that made Cole's blood run ice cold. Dominic Hayes was not just some drifter passing through town. He was the only son of Alastair Hayes. Hayes ran Hayes Global Group, the same company secretly funding Harborview. Cole smiled slowly, teeth showing. This was not a threat anymore. This was leverage he could use. He called Marcus Vance that same night, feet propped up on his office desk. "Our little problem on the shoreline just became our biggest advantage," Cole said, laughing into the phone. Vance sounded less certain on the other end. "Are you sure about this, Jefferson? Billionaires don't like being cornered." "Everyone has a price," Cole said. "Even Alastair Hayes has a soft spot. It's called his son." He hung up and poured himself a drink, ice clinking against the glass. Somewhere across town, the man he planned to corner was tucking his daughter into bed. He had no idea what was coming next. He arranged a private meeting at a quiet roadside diner at 3 in the afternoon. Steam rose off his black coffee as he slid a folder across the sticky table. "I know who your father is," Cole said, watching Dominic's face closely. "And I know you're raising that little girl with no home and no steady income." Dominic's chest tightened like a fist closing. He said nothing at all, jaw locked shut. "One phone call to Child Protective Services," Cole continued, leaning in, "and Hazel goes into foster care by tomorrow morning." The words hit Dominic like a punch straight to the ribs. His hands curled into tight fists beneath the table, knuckles cracking softly. "Convince your father to release the next $15 million for Harborview," Cole said. "No questions asked about those old reports. Do that, and your daughter stays right where she belongs." Dominic's throat felt like it was slowly closing shut. He stared at Cole, jaw locked tight, saying absolutely nothing. Silence stretched between them, heavy and thick. Cole leaned back in the booth, satisfied, certain he had already won this game. Dominic walked back to Clara's house in silence, snow crunching under his boots. Every streetlight seemed too bright, every shadow too long. He said nothing when he stepped through the door. Clara noticed right away. She set down the dish towel in her hands. "What happened?" she asked, stepping closer. "Your face looks like you saw a ghost." Dominic sank into a kitchen chair, head in his hands. He told her everything: the blackmail, the threat against Hazel, the $15 million Cole demanded. Clara's face went pale, then hardened into something firm and steady. "You are not handing that man your daughter's future," she said. "We fight this together or not at all." "You don't understand," Dominic said, voice cracking slightly. "My father hasn't spoken to me in 6 years. He might not even open the door." Clara knelt beside his chair and took both his hands in hers. Her palms were rough from years of library work, but warm. "Then you knock anyway," she said, "like you did on my porch." That night, Dominic boarded a late bus bound for Portland, forehead pressed against the cold glass. 6 long years had passed since he last spoke to his father. 6 years of silence, pride, and distance stretched between them like a canyon nobody could cross. The Hayes Global Group office tower rose into the rainy sky, all glass and cold steel edges. Dominic walked inside wearing his same worn coat, melting snow still dripping off his shoulders. Alastair Hayes sat behind a massive desk, hard to read, powerful, unchanged by time or weather. "You left to live on the street," Alastair said, his voice flat as poured concrete. "Now you're back to lecture me on business?" Dominic dropped the stolen blueprints hard onto the polished desk. "This project killed a man," Dominic said, his voice shaking now. "Cole is blackmailing me to keep it quiet. He's threatening to take Hazel away from me." Alastair barely glanced down at the scattered papers. "That project brings this company tens of millions of dollars," he said coldly, without blinking. "I won't halt it over accusations with no solid legal proof." Something inside Dominic broke fully apart in that single moment. He walked out into the freezing Portland rain with absolutely nothing left. No money, no plan, no father willing to help him save his own daughter. For a long moment, he stood on the empty sidewalk. He let the rain soak through his coat. He felt like he had lost everything all over again, right down to the bone. Behind him, in the quiet office, Alastair sat alone for a long time. He picked up the blueprints Dominic left on the desk. His fingers traced the same cracked foundation lines his son had shown him minutes earlier. He thought about his late wife, and how she always said Dominic had her stubborn heart. He thought about 6 years of unanswered calls, all sitting heavy in his chest like stone. Alastair picked up his office phone and dialed a number he rarely used. "Give me an outside audit team," he said quietly. "Send them to Oak Ridge tonight. Tell no one at Harborview." But 3 states away, something Dominic could not, yet see was already beginning to shift quietly. Dominic returned to Oak Ridge broken and soaked to the skin. He found Clara by the fireplace, holding Hazel close. Clara had spent her last few dollars on a small pink coat for the shivering girl. She did not scold him for failing his father. She simply reached into the metal box and pulled out something new. It was an old cassette recorder that once belonged to David. She pressed play with a trembling finger. A scratchy voice filled the quiet room. It was David's voice, warning his supervisor about cracks in the harbor's foundation years earlier. The recording proved he was silenced, not careless like the reports claimed. Dominic's eyes stung hard as he listened, throat tight. This was the missing piece they both needed. Then his phone buzzed once in his pocket. A message from his father's assistant, sent in complete secret. Alastair had quietly ordered an outside audit team into Oak Ridge right after Dominic's visit to his office. Hope, thin but real, began to spread through the small wooden house once again. Dominic pulled Clara into a tight hug, the recorder still warm between them. Hazel wrapped her small arms around both their legs, giggling at the sudden group hug. "We're not done fighting," Dominic said, resting his chin on Clara's head. "But we're not alone anymore, either." News of the standoff and the stalled funding spread through Oak Ridge like wildfire. Roy Baxter told 2 neighbors at the hardware store. Those neighbors told 3 more at church that Sunday. By Tuesday, half the town knew Jefferson Cole was hiding something rotten. Jefferson Cole felt the walls closing in around him fast. Funding had stalled without warning. Auditors were now digging through his old files. He knew somehow he had been exposed. He decided to strike hard before the public hearing could even happen. At 8 in the morning, Cole made his move. He sent 2 dirty local officers and a Child Protective Services agent to Clara's door. Their orders were simple: take Hazel away by force if needed. Dominic slammed the door shut and locked it fast, hands shaking with pure adrenaline. He grabbed his phone and started streaming live to social media. Every second of the standoff played out for the whole town watching at home. Within minutes, dozens of Oak Ridge residents rushed toward the house from every direction. They formed a solid human wall around the porch, blocking the officers fully from moving forward. The agents backed away slowly, forced to wait for the public hearing scheduled that same afternoon downtown. At 2 o'clock sharp, the town hall filled past capacity, chairs scraping against the old wooden floor. Reporters lined the back wall with cameras ready. The old heating vents rattled softly overhead in the sudden silence. Jefferson Cole stepped up to the podium, smiling with false, practiced confidence. "This project is fully legal," he announced, voice booming through the microphone. "The eviction orders will proceed exactly as planned." Then the double doors at the back of the hall swung open with a loud bang. Dominic walked in wearing a sharp new suit, holding Hazel's small hand tight. Beside him walked Alastair Hayes, followed by a line of serious lawyers in dark coats. The entire room went fully silent, every chair frozen in place. Dominic stepped up to the microphone, hands steady despite everything inside him. He spoke Clara's name, David's name, and finally his own full identity out loud. He played the recording of David's warning through the hall speakers. He revealed the falsified inspection reports Cole had approved without ever reading them. He played the blackmail conversation from the diner, word for word, sentence by sentence. Somewhere in the crowd, a radiator clicked twice against the wall. Nobody moved. Nobody whispered. Even the reporters in the back stopped typing on their laptops. Jefferson Cole's hands gripped the edge of the podium. His knuckles turned white, then bloodless. "This is fabricated," he said, but his voice wavered on the last word. Sweat beaded along his hairline despite the cold hall. "The recordings are time-stamped and verified," Dominic said calmly. "Federal auditors confirmed every document 3 days ago." Cole opened his mouth again, but nothing came out. His shoulders dropped an inch, then another. Clara stood near the front row, Hazel's small hand tucked inside hers. She watched the man who tried to steal her home. He shrank in front of the entire town. Alastair took the microphone next, standing tall beside his son. He apologized publicly to Clara Montgomery and every single family in Oak Ridge. He announced the firing of the entire old project management team on the spot. Gasps rippled through the crowded hall like a wave. Then applause thundered through the room, loud and unstoppable. 2 federal agents walked calmly toward the podium and placed cold handcuffs on Jefferson Cole's wrists. His face turned pale as paper, all the color draining away. He did not resist even once. Marcus Vance stood frozen near the side exit, watching his old boss led away in handcuffs. He slipped quietly out the back door before any reporter could stop him. Outside the town hall, the snow had turned to soft spring rain. Clara stood on the steps, with Hazel asleep against her shoulder. She watched the crowd spill into the night air. For the first time in years, the weight on her chest finally felt lighter. 5 months later, Oak Ridge looked like an entirely different town. The Harborview project was canceled for good, every permit torn up. In its place, workers built a small community park along the safe, rebuilt shoreline. Clara's mid-century wooden home stood fixed and warm again, no longer under any threat. Her $25,000 debt vanished fully. Hayes Global Group paid a $2 million settlement for David's wrongful death years earlier. Dominic chose to run the new community trust fund his father created for Oak Ridge. He returned to engineering. This time he built safe structures for working families, not corporate profit. Roy Baxter was the old fisherman from Clara Street. He became the first foreman hired for the new park. He liked to say Dominic saved the whole coastline with a shovel and a bad night's sleep. Alastair Hayes visited Oak Ridge twice that spring, something nobody expected from a man like him. He sat quietly at Clara's kitchen table and drank coffee from a chipped mug. He never once mentioned money. Jefferson Cole's trial ended in late April. A jury found him guilty of bribery, fraud, and attempted blackmail. He would not see the ocean again for a very long time. Abigail Vance received a small plaque from the town council for her courage. She kept it on her nightstand at the nursing home, next to a photo of David Montgomery. Clara visited her every Sunday afternoon, always with fresh flowers from the new community garden. She read Abigail the local newspaper out loud, page by page. It reminded her of reading old case files in the library basement. Hazel started kindergarten that fall at Oak Ridge Elementary, just 2 blocks from the rebuilt house. She carried a small backpack Clara sewed by hand, decorated with paper birds along the strap. Some evenings, the 3 of them still sat by the same fireplace, where everything began. The wood crackled and popped, filling the room with warm orange light. Dominic often thought back to that first freezing knock on the door. He never forgot how close he came to losing everything that winter. He never forgot the woman brave enough to open her door to strangers in a storm. Clara, for her part, stopped waking up to silence. The house that once felt like a tomb now felt like a home again. Small shoes sat by the door. Laughter filled the rooms after dinner. Roy Baxter still stopped by every Friday with fresh fish wrapped in newspaper. He always said the whole street owed Clara for opening her door that first freezing night. Sometimes Clara caught herself staring at the front door, remembering the sound of those 3 soft knocks. She no longer feared the sound of strangers in the dark. Dominic often told Hazel the story of that blizzard night, softened for a 5-year-old's ears. He always ended it the same way, telling her kindness can knock quietly and change everything. Hazel would just laugh. She always asked him to tell it again, tugging at his sleeve until he gave in. On a warm spring evening, golden light spread wide across the rebuilt harbor. Dominic, Clara, and Hazel walked together along the new wooden pier, slow and easy. Hazel laughed and grabbed both of their hands at once, swinging her small arms between them. The wind off the Oregon coast felt gentle now, nothing like that freezing night back in December. Clara looked over at Dominic and smiled, calm and certain of everything ahead. A stranger's quiet kindness on one dark porch had changed everything for both of them. It gave a broken father his family back, whole again, and it gave a lonely widow a home filled with love once more.